Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, Editor-in-Chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's new webinar series sponsored by RDI Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by our Associate Editor, Lenore Fido, and features Jennifer Shaheen, President of the Technology Therapy Group. Before I turn it over to Lenore to get the webinar started, I just want to let our attendees know if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box. That is the box at the bottom of your screen with the 2 speech bubbles above it. I will be back on at the end of the discussion to share the questions with Lenore and Jennifer. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website on Friday following the live event, and also will go out in our daily newsletter that day. Now I'll turn it over to Lenore and Jennifer, and I'll be back to field any questions at the end. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Jennifer, for being here. So you and I, we're going to be talking about data today. So when I first reached out to you and asked, did you want to join me on this webinar, you said that data was your absolute favorite topic. So why is data your favorite topic?
Well, first off, thank you so much for reaching out, and I appreciate having an opportunity to talk to the jewelry community about this because I feel like I'm on a mission. And the reason it is one of my favorite topics, and I have to admit I'm cheating and looking at some of my notes, there's so many opportunities for businesses when they gain clarity, and that comes with data. And I think that's probably why it's becoming one of my favorite topics is everybody once they start to really understand the opportunities in their data, they start to really get that aha moment. And so just a little background for everybody on me is I've been in business since my junior year of college. And so I have the same bad habits, and I call it a bad habit because I totally get it, of like trusting my gut. And right. One of the things that I really love about getting involved with data and some of the things that we're going to talk about today is it becomes a gut check. And I think with everything that's going on, sometimes we just need that as business owners, and that can be a really great opportunity. It also is a way to really just help us inform ourselves about, what's going on with everything from staff members to customers and even partners, outside agencies. By really understanding data, you really can understand what's going on in your business today.
Right. So, just to start with the very, very basics, yep. Where are the best places to collect data from?
So I want to talk about the 2 types of data.
Okay.
And so the reason I bring it up as we're talking about the best places to collect data is because I think in general, what happens is people don't realize we have 2 kinds of data. We have observational data and objective data. And so objective data can be really part of like almost passive data collection. Before we opened up our webinar today, we were having a little chat about, how companies are doing this already. So, right. For your stores, manufacturers, everybody, there's plenty of digital tools out there, and you probably have them at your fingertips. Your website is a great passive data collection tool. Your social media is doing it for you already. You just may not be looking at that. And there's other tools too, like a lot of people have, Podium or other SMS systems that in itself has data components to it. Your point of sale system has data. So these are all, passive. And then some other things that are more objective based can be like surveys that you create. You might have some type of a customer database, a CRM, customer relationship management system. We also recommend data tracking in the call world. So calls, because, especially nowadays. And then the last one I added in today when I was going through my notes is also with all the virtual appointment setting that we have, there's another great place for you to kind of collect some information. And then the observational side, I think we do that all intuitively, but we're not organizing it. And I think that's where we go back to, Lenore, sort of like a CRM, right? Because if we could just organize our observational data a little bit more, you know, we could better understand the behaviors and the personality traits that come together for our customers. And based on some of your questions, I have a little way we can work on that next.
Gotcha. So, I mean, to your point, there are different types of data, right? So you have like descriptive data that's going to tell you your customer's age or their income, or then you have behavioral data that's going to tell you what browser are they using, what is it that they're shopping for. So when you're looking at all of this data, is there one type that's going to be more useful for you than the other?
It's a very great question, Lenore, and I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And the truth is, a lot of research has been done on this, is both is what is important. And I think the thing that happens is we look at it in silos. In prepping for today's session, I wanted to think of a practical experience for our stores. And so every store I work with has some type of a VIP customer list. And so that's based off of purchasing behavior, most likely, the volume or the type of product.
Right.
But as we just talked about, they're probably not looking at any other psychographics. So what I mean by that is not necessarily age and gender, but what kind of phone do they carry? You know, or what type of cars do they drive? Or other behaviors that we can really understand if we start to get to know. Do they play golf? And I know these sound like silly little things, but what's interesting about that is if you were to take that purchasing behavior and pair it up with some of this observational data, and if you have that same layer of observational data on some of your other customers, you could start to find what are called in data cohorts or clusters. And you can probably find those people who are about to tip into VIP, but maybe you're just not spending enough time communicating with them. So that's why I bring it up, because I think when people think about data, they think about just what you brought up is the, you know, the basic like age, gender, and there's so much more about us now.
Right.
And so much that's being tracked about us digitally. We can learn so much, even if we keep track of it. And there's a really great and interesting case study that I read about H&M. And H&M used to have, this is a corporate-wide thing, every morning they would have, during their staff meeting, it was everyone's job to come to the front and explain what the cute outfits were or where people were being drawn. And they would move things around the store based on what observational data. So the organization worked off both the, you know, the mapping and looking at patterns in the store, but they also listened to the humans.
Right.
And that's the really great thing about, you know, owning a shop is you as a store owner or your team members, if you can organize some of your observational data and look at it with your objective data, you can really learn a lot more about your customers and then also bring them together or find the people who could tip into that next purchasing layer.
Right. And so, I mean, to your point, there is so much data out there and there's so many different types of data available for you to collect. So when we're talking about data, how much data do you need? Is it quality over quantity? Is it, you know, the more the better?
Yep. It is a great question. And I think it's one of the things I hear a lot, especially from startups.
Right.
Because I think startup businesses feel like they don't have enough data. And first off, most of the time, if you haven't been paying attention to data, your data may not be clean. And so you may have good amount of quantity of data, but it may not be as much quality as you think. So quality is always more important. And it's interesting because even a small group of looking at just, what's in your point of sales system or your email marketing, you can really get a good sense just from small numbers, what trends. And so when you ask that question, it's not just about understanding the data amounts, but also you have to start with questions, just like you're asking me, but let's ask business questions. Like, what do we want to learn? And with small amounts of data will allow you to start beginning to make predictions. So you can then say, hypothesize your gut. Let's look at what you think is going to happen,
Right.
and use that data to see if you were right or if you need to make some shifts in your business.
Right, to see if the data backs you up.
Exactly.
So now I have all of this data. What do I do with it? Is there a CRM system that you recommend? Are there some other tools that I can use to organize it?
Absolutely. So I happen to have something prepared to show.
Okay, please.
But a couple of things, just so everybody's clear, is what you're looking for is to build and create what would be called a data dashboard. And so I'm going to share with everyone an example of one that I have for a client. And it's made in Data Studio. There are other applications out there, Taboola, Looker. Data Studio is part of the Google sphere, and it allows you to pull in data from multiple places. So like one of the reports we're looking at right now is pulling your information from your Google Webmaster and your Google Analytics. So why that's important is because, Lenore, what happens is so many people look at their analytics here and their social media here and something else here. And if you can bring them all into a cohesive report, which is what we've done here, and start organizing it, it's going to make it a lot easier. So just so everybody's familiar, and you can see it, it's, and I'm logged in, of course. So this is Data Studio. So let me just open this in a quick incognito window so everybody can see what that looks like. And this would be where you might want to go and start creating reports. So, and this is a free tool, but just want to make sure it stopped sharing. Did it stop screen sharing, or is it still doing?
Nope, still sharing.
Okay, thank you. I'm always finding where the Zoom button moved to. But that would be what I would recommend, because, and just to give everybody an understanding, like if you have, so Data Studio actually has a place for you to pull data from your Google My Business, so your local business listing. And I like to look at that against analytics, because I want to understand, how many people went to the maps but didn't actually go to our website, and are we seeing the same trends in traffic? Or we use call tracking a lot for clients, so we pull the call reporting into a place like this as well, so we can follow everything in one place. And I think that's the thing that makes it so difficult, is because people are overwhelmed about this. And if you're looking at analytics in Facebook and then in Instagram, if you can get it all organized in one place, and then start adding components of segmentation, that will help. Because without it, you'll hear this a lot whenever you listen to data webinars or anything around data, is you need context. And
Right.
when they're all separated, that's one of the biggest things that happen for companies, is they just can't start drawing conclusions. Then they're going back to, this is why I trust my gut. It's because the data is all over the place. So there's a couple of tools that you can start with.
Right, so the organization is really important for giving yourself that context and being able to see all this scattered data in one place and sort of get a clearer picture of what's going on.
Correct. And so like one of the exercises I often ask clients, and everyone can absolutely do this, you'd have to just jump from one application to the other. But if you say, we are not necessarily looking at like advertising data, but if you were to say your average customer range is between, you know, this age and this age, and you feel that that's what it is, then you should be able to go look at your social media and look at, you know, your Google Analytics and other information. Your ads actually, because you're paying for them, they often give you back that information. So,
Sure.
you know, on Facebook, you're targeting people based on age, oftentimes, but with like a search ad on Google, I don't know how old you are, Lenore. You type in a Google search and you end up on my website. Now Google is going to share that information back with me.
Right.
So, so you can really get a good understanding of your audience by just jumping through. But if you centralize it in a dashboard like this, it'll make it easier for you to ask questions.
Right. And so this is probably the big question of the whole webinar. How do I then use this information to increase sales?
Perfect. So, of course, I have another one.
Please go right ahead.
So I wanted to show everybody an example of, and this is where the PowerPoint. Okay, perfect.
There
So
you go.
we're actually looking at a live website in mobile mode, because this is designed to run, and it's a contest that we run, Lenore. And why I wanted to bring it up is because the contest is really a data tracking contest. So yes, they're giving $1,000 towards an engagement ring. I can't begin to tell you how many stores do some type of a contest. But why this is important is because we track what type of gem they're looking for center stone. We're tracking what type of shape. And then we ask them when they're getting engaged. And why I wanted to bring this one up, and how this impacted sales for our client, is because by looking at this information, what was really helpful is they didn't realize how many people were interested in princess cut. And that is a different type of buyer than the oval or the more traditional. So in doing this, it allowed them to now do more particular outreach to those, because from the outside looking in, they didn't want to change the spotlighting of the products that bring in more of a higher end client.
Sure.
But by looking at that information, they realized, you know what, we've got this product. We have princess cut and diamonds, and this is a unique opportunity for us to, you know, bring people in and book appointments. And so that's sort of a, you know, an understanding of, by just us looking at the results from this contest across multiple months, it was actually a surprise for Cottage Hill. They were like, we didn't think that people were even interested, and we don't put it out there. And
Wow.
so it really does make a difference, because again, right, the data showed them something they didn't expect.
Right. And I mean, ideally, what you want to do with these tools is to get to know your customer better, and offer them more of what they want. But then, I mean, at the same time, shoppers, in light of recent events, you know, can be a little bit more wary about how much data you are collecting. So, I mean, besides the usual like disclosures that you have when you are collecting any type of data, I mean, is it worth explaining to your customer what data you're going to collect about them and why?
So first off, that's a great question for multiple reasons. One, legal, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on webinars. But you know, you are actually required to put all of that information on your website in a privacy policy.
Right.
And you actually are not allowed to advertise without it. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but it actually is a requirement to advertise on platforms. But that being said, I would say that one, the more informed consumers, they actually probably say it to you and have even brought it up. Or I know this happens to me when I go into store and somebody will say, well, can I get your email address? And it's like, well, I just don't want to end up on another, list. But if
Right.
you give them your, any type of data on you at all, they're going to be tracking you. So
Right.
today's consumer is very clear of that. Actually, what's interesting and more is that you will start to see that you're going to find some holes in data tracking because of the fact, and I don't know if you do this, Lenore, do you ever open an incognito window or a private browsing window?
Yeah, I mean, especially, if it's something that's just, a passing interest that I was just kind of curious about, and I don't want 50,000 ads for whatever it is I was looking up. Yeah, I do that sometimes.
Absolutely. So you're becoming one of those more informed consumers, and hopefully you're passing that knowledge forward to like older generations. So I do that with my mom and dad, as I have to remind them, hey, let me show you the private window. But I think especially in a store, if you're going to start asking for things, you should be transparent.
Sure.
Help them understand. And actually what's really interesting, and I'm a big Nordstrom shopper, I love them, but that's part of one of the things they'll say is like, can you give us feedback to help us make your buying experience better? And I think it's like anything else, it's about how you frame it.
Right.
And then, of course, making sure that people know how you're protecting their information and that they can request it at any time if they need it, and it can be removed at any time.
Right. I mean, I think as a customer, I think there are times when I would have appreciated knowing that. I mean, for instance, there is a store that I shop at pretty often, and I have their app on my phone. And then one day I was out, just shopping around, and I got this push notification that was like, hey, we see you're in the area. You should like stop in and check out our sale. And so this app that I had downloaded obviously had some sort of location tracker in it, so they knew that I was nearby. But I got that push notification and I was like, that's a little bit creepy. Like, I don't know that I like that. And so instead of pulling me in, they sort of pushed me away a little bit.
Mhm.
So, I mean, how do you offer a customer something that your data has told you that they're going to be interested in a way that doesn't creep them out?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the things that you can do and you should do is don't bury it in terms and conditions.
Right.
So the example you gave is a perfect one, which is, when you opt into our push notifications, we're also monitoring your physical location. If you'd like that feature to be turned off. And I think that you and stores and companies in general need to be mentioning that.
Right.
I know, to your point, like one of the things that throws me off on larger company sites is when I go there and all of a sudden they want my location.
Yeah.
And this happens with our brands. So in the jewelry industry, if you go to, a very sizable brand, they're trying to drive traffic to the local business, but it would be better if they were to ask it as opposed to it being an alert feels so impersonal. So
Right.
I think what you're looking for here, and I think most consumers are, is a balance between making our buying experience better, but also balancing with customer experience and explaining things a little bit more about this and why you're doing it and how it impacts them, and that they can opt out at any time. And then making it easy to opt out. I think the other part of what you're also mentioning is things that push you away is because people make it difficult for someone to unsubscribe or
Right.
opt out or any of that. If we make things easier, customers will opt in and out of things because they want a frictionless buying experience. That is a very common term we hear in retail, and you cannot have that buying experience without sharing data.
Right.
So I think
then,
framing.
so my last question for you would be, we've spoken about where do you find data, how do you organize it, what do you do with it? So, I mean, you're a professional at this, but someone else coming into this for the first time might be hearing all this information and thinking, this sounds a little bit too complicated. Like I understand the benefits, but this feels kind of overwhelming.
Mhm.
What would you say to someone like that?
So we've all heard this message before. How do you eat an elephant? Go ahead. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
I don't know.
You've never heard this. This is
No,
great.
I haven't.
Poor Lenore on the spot.
You did.
You
So-
eat an elephant one bite at a time. And I always loved that saying because it's true. The question you're asking is the fact that, and I have to give props to Cottage Hill because they said this on a call. Most of our store owners, you're thinking about the end results of eating the elephant and you're full.
Right.
And you're too far down. It's kind of like recognizing, during COVID, I decided I really wanted to get healthier and thinner, but I couldn't think about that. I just had to think every day, I just need to do something.
Right.
So that's really what I want you to do. Like, you will get to it. It's called, you're stacking on your knowledge, right? So don't look at everything. Yes, you're right. For me, everything is comfort. But for you, if you're going to start with data, the first thing you start with is step away from the data and write down questions. Like you don't know what you want from your data until you start inquiring of it. And I think what happens, and this happens with so many of us, is I appreciate a jewelry buyer more than anything else because I walk into a show, and I don't know how they do it. And it's because I'm overwhelmed. And
Right.
I think when I've talked to buyers, it's like, well, I sit down and I look at my inventory and I figure out what I need. Well, guess what? It's the same process. Is don't look at the data first. Step back and say, what do I want to understand about my marketing? What do I want to understand about my customers? What do I want to understand about, and fill it in? And then start digging into that. Now, second question is, okay, once you've identified that, what tools are giving you that information? So if I want to understand what my customers are interested in for products. Okay, so what tools give us that information? Well, our analytics will tell us what products they're looking at on our website. Our social media posts, if we're sharing products, will show us. And we can even click and see which ones have thumbs up things, so you can actually even specifically look at that. Your email marketing, if you included that product in an email, is telling you that. So I think the thing I always tell people to do is to get away from the reports, because the reports are, I think, what scares you. It's
Right.
It's like, going to a Zumba class when you feel like you have two left feet. You want to practice at home first. So
Right.
let's figure out what we want from our reports, and then we can start, and then the second part of it is don't try and do everything at once.
Yeah.
So that data studio report, those have taken me a couple of years to learn how to build, and I'm still customizing them. And, so it takes time. So don't think that you're going to be, the top athlete when you're just learning to swing the bat.
Right. So just sort of taking it day by day, one step at a time.
You got it.
Right. All right. Well, that is pretty much it for my questions for you. But I can turn it over to Michelle. I think she might have some questions for us.
Thank you so much, Lenore and Jennifer. That was great discussion. And Jennifer, congrats on your quarantine goals. I feel like a lot of us went in the other direction with our quarantine fitness. So that's awesome.
Thank you. And I will tell you this, Michelle, I did it all off of data tracking with my Apple Watch and other apps. And such a geek.
So many
It's wa-
applications.
it's watching you, Jennifer. It
Yes.
knows what you're doing. And thanks again to our sponsor today, RDI Diamonds. As a reminder, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can today. While we compile the Q&A list, I just want to say a quick word about RDI Diamonds. RDI Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed. From flexible memo options, a partnership with De Beers Group Industry Services, to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. That is rdidiamonds.com. Now let's get started with our listener questions. The first question I wanted to get into came from an attendee who wanted to know, Jennifer, with the new Apple's new iOS 14 coming out, it's hard to believe we're on 14, but we are. There are some new privacy policies around that, and this listener wants to know, how will this impact data and data collection?
It's a great question. So Apple has been on a mission for a while to help people with their privacy. But what you also have to remember is you have other tools in there that you're, to use those tools, you are opting into. So this is one of the reasons why you will find that bigger companies are going to push you to use their apps as opposed to their websites, because you will be passing basic anonymous data. That is what you're doing anyways. But this is where you're going to see the rise of the apps grow. And they have been. One, they give consumers a better customer experience. But the other reason is once they're in the app, Apple doesn't control that as much anymore. There is provisions for that you have to opt into by using the app. And that's a huge thing with like Amazon and some of the other tools. It's one of the reasons why you'll find so many companies, sizable companies, push you to use their apps.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize it. But I would say from a customer standpoint, I agree. I prefer the app. I always find it. I love to shop from apps. So we have another question, which is kind of more data marketing related. This jeweler writes, we have so much data from eBlast, from direct mail. I mean, they're getting some from kind of, old fashioned, if you will, kinds of marketing and modern marketing. Where have you found the best results? And I assume they mean best results with reaching customers and getting customers to respond.
So, I can't answer that question. And the reason I can't answer that question is because I don't see the data. There's two things about that. One, you'll find the answer to that by pulling all of that data into something like Data Studio. But another thing you can do that I think is really important is that when you're using non-digital tools like radio, television, you need to spotlight into your data components what dates they launch and end, and look at spikes and trend lines. You will not know the answer to those questions without that. Then you're hypothesizing. And then the third thing, unfortunately, is when you most people have the customer and say, well, what brought you into our store today? And you're typing it into the point of sale system. If that's too general, you're not getting the right accuracy of your data. And that's sort of what I was trying to bring up at the very beginning, is like, we want to make things easy for people, but we're not being specific enough. So Michelle, it would be difficult for me to answer the conversions, because there's something in data tracking digitally called the messy middle. And what that is I can probably tell you exactly what tool brought them to your website or into your store, but the messy middle is all the things they did in the middle before they purchased. So it isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. It is something that you can track, but you are going to have to start pulling everything into one place and making sure it's all clean and easy to follow. So I sadly have to see your data to answer that question. I probably could with some cleanup, but definitely need to see it to answer whether, you know, one tool works over another.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We have a couple questions that have come in here.
Yeah.
One of our attendees today says, you make a great point about knowing what you want from the data. And then he specifically wants to know, what are some ways to leverage data from Instagram other than just likes? Instagram is a big platform for jewelers, designers, obviously, because our product is so visual. Right.
Absolutely. So, you know, actually, when you talk about likes, you know, one of the things that I would recommend that you do, and by the way, from the outside looking in, you don't see this, like, is we often tell you to look at each individual post and start almost pulling it into, so like Facebook's Creator Studio will do this for you with their data. So if you look at it in Creator Studio, it'll be easier. You'll actually start to see the watch and the engagement. And then the other thing to remember about Instagram is, remember, Facebook owns it. So you can start to look at that information mixed into their tools. They just launched a new Facebook analytics system that I'm just getting my hands into because it's amazing. But I would look more at the messaging, like how much time people are watching the videos, and where they're clicking on or liking or engaging with it, and then start comparing which ones. The other thing to look at, Michelle, for that individual is the times of day and what particular discovery components came out of that. So were there particular hashtags? So this is them really having to break down some of their posts and looking at some of the information there. And then I would also look at it overarching in the trends of the week and the month, because, you know, you can start to make incorrect correlations if you're just focused on one component.
Okay, thank you so much. And then we have another question from a listener here today. Hi, great information. He wants to know specifically for that engagement ring contest, and I think it was the Diamond Cottage was the name of the...
Yeah, it's our contest. We designed it. It's but we are running it with a particular store. So
that for that engagement ring contest that tracked different data points, how is the content advertised and sent to customers? Thank you.
Absolutely. And by the way, I have the data tracking on conversions on this too. So we did it multiple ways. Everything had it's called a tracking URL. So when you set up any inbound anything, that contest does not sit on their website. It is our proprietary contest. So anytime anything comes into the contest, we had a URL tracking. So essentially we can tell you, so it was distributed on Facebook advertising, which will be Facebook and Instagram. It was in Google extensions, not the ad itself, but if you've ever run Google ads, underneath the ads, you see there's little call outs and things like that. Those are called Google extensions. And then we also did, on their actual website, we ran a banner. What we tracked is not only every person that came into the site, but whether, so what I didn't finish showing you is, because it takes too long, is we tracked the person's information and they type in their partner's information. So we know how many came through from Google, how many came through from Instagram, how many came through from Facebook, and we even know which versions of ads converted. So everything had a tracking component. And if we really wanted to dig into it in a deeper way, we could also probably tell you location based off of the ads, etc.
And this is my question off of your answer. When you run ads on Facebook, do you recommend also running them on Instagram at the same time? You know, you have that option in Facebook to always also run on Instagram. Do you recommend doing that all the time, or should that be looked at on a case-by-case basis?
That is a great question. So there's two things. So we're Facebook partners. So I wanted to make sure everybody understands that, because their education and training explains to us that it is always better to let them figure it out. So they're machine learning. However, one of the things you find with machines is machines can actually be somewhat biased. It actually is a recommendation that you run it naturally, and then we often separate it out depending upon the ad type and the focus. So engagement rings is a really common example, because you have the first time and then you have the remarry one. That would be me. So the ring that you might get when you're in your 20s and early 30s may be different. So when you're targeting, one of the things that the ad system's trying to do for you, and this is important that everybody understand this, is it's trying to serve up your ad to the right customer at the right price. And that second part is important, because that's the machine that's deciding on your behalf. So unfortunately, and this is why I say it's a case-by-case basis, is because if you have something more generic, then you should let the algorithm decide and it will serve it up best. But if you know you have to be very specific with your audience, I do recommend that you separate it out so that you are getting the correct audience, because they may not serve your ad to the customer type you want, because that customer type is more expensive and maybe harder to reach because of competition on there. So that's one of the reasons why I bring it up, because it does depend.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Another question, and we have two more questions here so far. Someone wanted to know, what are the best practices cross-industry for data science in terms of using it to maximize lifetime customer value? I think they're kind of asking, like, using data to keep your customers and deliver them the best service for, from their engagement ring to their anniversary band and beyond.
So Michelle, I apologize because I kind of got lost in the question. So could you repeat it?
Yeah, sure. Best practices for data science when it comes to maximizing lifetime customer value.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. So, so I did take a class on this actually. There is mapping and particular formulas that you should be using to show purchase behavior, and then also the churn rate and predictions. So I'm more than happy to send over, because it's a really complicated question, but you definitely should start looking into this because there is this ability now, and that's actually part of those sort of cohorts where you can start to identify which customers have the greatest lifetime value for you, and then you can also start targeting more of the customer types. But it would be complicated to sort of explain through on a webinar without showing formulas.
Okay, no, very good. That's great. We have one comment that came in from one of our listeners. They note that the Apple Summit just finished and the new iOS is coming out Wednesday, just FYI for everyone. So if you're looking to buy a new iPhone, don't do it tonight. And then we have another question that just came in. A listener wants to know, looking to the future, which platforms, meaning Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc., do you feel will provide the biggest opportunity to leverage data, and why?
That's a good one.
It's an interesting question because part of the issue is, Facebook has actually been at the forefront of data collection, but it's also what got them in trouble.
Sure.
So I have to be honest, I'm not as familiar with TikTok. We are actually, and I think I saw this even in some of the publications recently, we're actually getting into it ourselves. So I'm not sure every component that they track. So I'm not sure that I could give it justice. So platform-wise, you know, what I know right now, I would say when you talk about Facebook and Instagram, remember they're going to share that information, even though they're two separate systems. And believe it or not, don't forget about other tools as well, like platform-wise. I know we're talking B2C, but there's definitely other areas where your customers are being multi-tracked. So Google is a big part of this. I don't know if anyone has noticed this, but this cross-device tracking as well. So Facebook is going to do that from a social media perspective across desktop and mobile, where you wouldn't get that with Instagram, because who the heck looks at Instagram on desktop?
Right.
But Google is doing the same thing, and multi-devices. So I think if we're talking social, you're probably going to get a lot more from the Facebook sphere. But again, I feel I can't say definitively because I'm just not familiar enough with TikTok. However, TikTok again is mobile only. So.
Right. It's also fair to point out that Instagram has its now Instagram Reels, which they do a very nice job of kind of letting other people come out with things and then doing their own Instagram version of that and being very successful. So Instagram Reels, we've written about it on National Jeweler, is Instagram's kind of answer to TikTok. And from what I've seen on there, the Reels are fine. It looks like people are using it. So, you know, it's kind of nice to think about having everything, you know, kind of in that one place.
Right.
Yep. And Facebook is doing other things to support and keep community, like their marketplace. We actually have a blog coming out in a little while about the event systems. So, you know, I think as long as they're continuing to innovate and grow and they're acquiring tools, their ecosphere of data collection is going to be strong. But I also don't want people to neglect the world of Google, because remember, Google is multiple things too. You've got Google, the search console, you've got YouTube, you've got Maps. So one of the things I always tell people, and this is a data tracking thing that we've done a lot on. So Michelle, earlier somebody said, you know, what converts better? We've actually done substantial studying about the number of people who register or purchase based off of Google versus social. And the path to purchase is usually faster through Google because they're already in a mindset of interest because they're seeking out businesses, whereas social, unfortunately, is a discovery platform. So the path to purchase is there and it's high, there's great quality to it, but it's definitely longer.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap it up. We don't have any more questions coming in. So thanks again to our guest, Jennifer, for joining us today, and to our editor, Lenore, for hosting. You can tune in for another episode of My Next Question next Tuesday. That's September 22nd. We'll be doing that one at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's my turn to host, and I'll be interviewing Stellar founder Matt Stellar. His company is 50 years old this year, but like everyone else, nothing happened the way they planned as far as celebrating that anniversary. So we're going to be talking about that and talking about his, talking about how he started his company, how he grew it, how they've handled the pandemic, etc. And I have just dropped the link into the chat there. If anyone wants to go check out our webinars page, you can sign up for that one or any future webinars. So thanks again for joining us today, and please take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.